We're partway through a series called What Are You Like? The Enneagram and Christian Discipleship. And the Enneagram is a personality tool with ancient roots. It grew up out of the Christian tradition and has proven very, very helpful for many different kinds of people, Christians and non-Christians alike, in growing in understanding of and compassion for oneself, but also one's neighbours as well. And the Enneagram, it can be particularly helpful for those of us who are seeking to follow Jesus, because it sheds light on our shadow side and reminds us of what a healthy version of our personality can look like as exemplified in Jesus Christ. Now, the Enneagram, some will like it, some will love it, some will be suspicious of it, but one thing is certain: it starts conversations. It starts conversations and it gets us talking about sin, honestly and openly, which of course doesn't always happen in church, which is strange. When we looked at Enneagram type 1, the reformer, we looked at anger. It was a way into talking about anger. When we looked at Enneagram 2, the helper, we looked at how some people, pride is a big issue. So it gave us a way into talking about pride. This morning we're looking at Enneagram type 3, the achiever, also known as the performer. And for these people, deceit is the big deadly sin, deceit. And of course we all have all the numbers. So even if you don't identify with 1, 2 or 3, none of us actually are completely disentangled from anger, pride, deceit. So we all have something to learn from the special dilemma of each number. So we're going to start by looking at 3 things that are difficult for 3s. And then we'll look at what a 3 looks like under stress and security. Then we'll take a dive into the big dilemma that 3s face, especially with the help of that character Jacob from Genesis. And then we'll survey the path of transformation, what transformation might look like for a 3. So path of transformation from deceit to truthfulness or honesty. So 3 things that are difficult for 3s. 3s find failure difficult. All 3s find failure difficult. Unhealthy 3s find it completely and utterly unacceptable. Often these 3s will struggle to admit mistakes and will possibly even intentionally cover up their failure or airbrush their failures to make them look like wins. The other side to this coin, of course, though, is that 3s actually don't fail very much at all. They are very competent people. You see a 3 and you think competency. They are often inspirational and persuasive and successful people. This is how people see them. And once people start seeing you in a way like this, in this way, you're hardly going to want to let anyone down, are you? People tend to look at 3s rather favourably because of their competency. In fact, many 3s, they gravitate towards certain careers where moving up is dependent on making good first impressions, or moving up is dependent on embodying the values of that organisation or company or whatever it is. Sadly, with 3s, they picked up a certain message in childhood, this message that says, you are what you do. You are what you do. People love you for what you do. And so 3s will often go through life racking up achievements, cutting corners if necessary. And that doesn't mean that they'll lie exactly, but they might creatively sculpt the truth. It will help them, perhaps, towards achieving their goal or appearing to achieve their goal. And actually appearance, this is really important with 3. Appearance is really important. 3s are like social chameleons. They walk into a crowded room and immediately they become who they need to be to fit in with the people who are there. They project the image that was required and often mirror the behaviour and convictions of those around them if it leads them to success over failure. And that, of course, it's good for them, and for the people around them quite enjoyable. Often they are easy and attractive people to be around. So 3s find failure difficult. Here's another thing they find difficult. 3s find playing second fiddle difficult. 3s are often the stars of the show. I'm not saying that 3s can't play a supportive role, but most threes would prefer to do their own thing if given the choice. If threes do find themselves in supportive roles, and they sometimes do play second fiddle, they often are thinking or dreaming about where that association with that leader might get them in the future. And the reality is with threes, they won't play second fiddle forever. Threes often take on numerous leadership roles to keep busy. Part of a three's growth is learning that they can just be another team member and support other people's leadership. One more thing that threes find difficult. Threes find naming feelings difficult. Naming feelings. In general, threes struggle more than any other type on the Enneagram to recognize and connect with their feelings. Threes might express an emotion. They might seem to be very emotional people. They might express an emotion to fit in, to be what is required for a particular situation, but they might at the same time be thinking of something entirely different while they are showing that emotion. So they might be, for example, quietly weeping at a funeral, but thinking about what they need to pick up from the shop on the way home at the same time. Threes know the way feelings can get in the way of progress, and they can. And so for that reason, threes will put the feelings to one side. It's as if threes have this big feelings to deal with later folder that keeps accumulating more and more feelings to deal with later folder. And of course, the reality is they don't go back to deal with that folder, and so it builds up. And this is if a three hasn't done significant inner work. They will keep adding to the folder, and eventually this folder could end up exploding. For example, if a three experiences a major health issue or burnout or a midlife crisis or something like that. So that's then when they have to deal with all of those feelings and emotions, but on the way they often won't deal with them. One three, a close friend of mine, described to me many years ago how he didn't really experience life as being emotional highs and lows, but in fact he spoke of his kind of emotional equilibrium going through life. And I thought it's so strange at the time because I feel emotions deep, but for him, no, it was level. The Enneagram's helped me to understand that a little bit more. Now with all of this, with threes and their struggle to name feelings, there are, with all of this stuff in the Enneagram, there are exceptions to this, of course. So some threes have had to face up to their feelings because of things that have happened in their lives. Threes that have, for example, experienced good counselling or spiritual direction or just a wise, trusted friend who stood alongside them. These threes will often be more aware of their feelings and the feelings of other people than a three who's not had someone like that in their life or hasn't processed stuff. It's especially important for a three to have someone in their life who can ask them the classic cliche therapist question, and how does that make you feel? And how does that make you feel? Because threes won't ask it for themselves. So someone needs to help a three to ask that question, and how did that make you feel? So there we have it. Three things that threes struggle with: failing, playing second fiddle, and naming feelings. You might be getting your head around what a three might look like. You might be thinking of people in your life, or maybe even yourself at this stage. I just want to throw a spanner in the works, just as you're getting your head around threes, because like all types, three will look slightly different depending on if they're experiencing stress or if they are enjoying security or thriving in life. So a three experiencing stress, they tend to be less goal-oriented and productive, and they tend to show the more unhealthy sides, perhaps, of type 9, the peacemaker. So they might choose the sofa and TV or unproductive busy work over their usual goal-oriented schedule. Their characteristic optimism might turn to self-doubt, perhaps, or they might start paying less attention to their appearance or exercise or healthy living, something like that. That's a three under stress. On the other hand, when threes are thriving in life, experiencing security, they move to the kind of positive side of 6, the loyalist. And with that, they become warmer, more in touch with their feelings and the feelings of others. They often become less competitive, and they recognise that they don't always need to be the star. They have more energy for family and friends, and they can finally experience being loved for who they actually are, rather than what they do. I think the 3, experiencing insecurity sounds great. It makes me want to be a 3. Before we hear more good news about 3s, we're going to need to actually dive deep into the great dilemma that 3s face, and it's really not pretty. To do that, we're going to need the help of Jacob in that story from Genesis. So 3s, they face this dilemma. They feel they need to prove their worth to win others' approval through success. So what drives a 3 is a kind of need to succeed. A need to succeed. Being successful is important, but actually looking successful is just as important for them. 3s tend to reject the idea that they can be seen for who they are and be unconditionally loved as it is. And so what often happens with 3s is they abandon their true selves for roles, to inhabit roles. A great example of this is Jacob in the book of Genesis. So Jacob, the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. Jacob has a twin brother called Esau, and Esau was the firstborn. He was the firstborn, which meant he would inherit the leadership of that family and also the judicial authority of his father. Now, before the reading that we heard read, there was another episode where Jacob, the younger brother, tricks Esau out of his birthright. And some of you might remember that story. So Jacob tricks Esau. Basically, Esau comes in from a long day of hunting, and he says to Jacob, give me some of that food. And Jacob says, well, I will give you some of this stew, this cup of stew, if you sell me your birthright. You know, that role of being firstborn. And so Esau says, well, I'm going to die anyway because I'm so hungry, so I may as well sell my birthright to you for that cup of stew. So that's what happens. So that's the first thing that happens. But then in this episode that we heard read, Jacob does something else, because having the birthright is not enough. He also wants the blessing. And so what Jacob does is he pretends to be Esau so that his father will bless him as the firstborn instead of Esau. So, with the help of his mother's cunning plan, Jacob puts on Esau's best clothes and covers himself with goat skins, etc., so that Isaac, who's blind at this point, will think that he is Esau. So Jacob gets the birthright, and then he gets the blessing, even though Jacob was not born first, nor was he his father's favourite, nor was he a great hunter like his brother Esau. But Jacob knew something. He knew how to win the love and recognition of his father by appearing to be someone else. Carefully crafting an image, carefully crafting a mask to deceive his father. And it worked. He got the birthright, he got the blessing. Jacob, like the quintessential 3, got results. He was productive in the things he was doing, he was successful. And like Jacob, 3s often tend to project the image required to, say, make the sale, or persuade the audience, or get the guy, or get the girl, or steal the birthright or blessing. The root sin, or the deadly sin of a 3 is deceit. And we can see that clearly in the story of Jacob. And often this deceit is unintentional at first. Unintentional. It happens by chance. But then a 3 gets a taste for crafting and recrafting their image because it gets them somewhere. And eventually a 3 might struggle to tell the difference between the fake image and the authentic self. And so unintentional deceit can turn into intentional deceit, and an intentional deceit can end up turning into self-deceit. And you lose track of who you are. Like every Enneagram number, in fact, threes, the issue is that they over-identify with the persona, and their true self gets lost in the performance. This is why threes struggle to name their feelings, because, how can you accurately play the part of Esau while processing the feelings of Jacob? You can't. And so you have to choose, and threes, they will choose their image over their own feelings and convictions, and so they don't name them. They don't process them. Threes, and this is quite sad really, but threes tend to not slow down long enough to reflect on their own lives. And so when they eventually do, because of something that's happened, maybe they got sick or experienced burnout, or have some sort of crisis, they often end up feeling like a fraud, because there's this kind of flash of insight, gets them to ask the question, well, is there anyone beneath this image that I'm projecting? What if I'm no more than an empty suit? And that's an uncomfortable, really uncomfortable question to ask. So what often happens actually is threes keep busy. They keep busy, and that's just what Jacob did, in fact, in Genesis. In the chapters following our reading, Jacob leaves home because Esau's going to kill him, and so he goes away to his uncle Laban, and he accumulates wealth, wives, children, livestock, deceiving people along the way when it suits him, when he needs to, in order to succeed. And then after many, many years, he decides it's time to get back in touch with his brother Esau. So he sends messengers to Esau and explains in that message all that he's accumulated, and explains that he wishes to find favour in his brother Esau's eyes. But then the messengers come back and say that Esau is heading out to meet Jacob with 400 men. And so Jacob completely freaks out. He's thinking that Esau is coming to kill him with an army of 400 men. And so Jacob does a number of things. Firstly, Jacob divides his family, servants and livestock, into two groups, so that if one group gets attacked, the other will survive. Secondly, what does he do? He prays like a crazy man to God. He prays and he prays. And thirdly, he gets some of his livestock, and this is really interesting, he gets some of his livestock and sends the livestock ahead of him like gifts for Esau, so that Esau so that they'll pacify Esau, and so that Jacob will find favour in Esau's eyes. And I find that point so interesting, because not only is it a good survival strategy, sending gifts on ahead to pacify your brother, but it's also a great example of the way threes will typically project an image ahead of them, an image that they believe will give them success. And so we find that even many years later, Jacob is still trying to win approval and love by projecting a certain image. Nothing's really changed here. And this is really getting us to the heart of the three's dilemma, because Jacob still believes that love is more to do with what you do and who you present and how you perform than who you are. And all of us, whether we identify with Enneagram Type 3 or not, we all will at times over-identify with the things that we do, and the person that we present. Our identity has a tendency to get all tangled up with our work, or with our role as a parent, or how we are seen at church. And I don't know what that is for you, what your identity gets tangled up in, but we can begin, this is the scary thing, we can begin to believe the lie. Self-deception. Believe the lie that we are what we do, which is not true. So that's the dilemma. But there is a path of transformation for threes. And for Jacob, his reconciliation with Esau was a key moment in his path towards transformation. So here's what happened. After his advance party of gifts goes up ahead to pacify Esau, Jacob then slowly begins approaching his brother Esau, bowing down 7 times as he approaches. But Esau does the complete opposite. Esau, this great burly hunter man, does the complete opposite. He runs towards Jacob. He embraces Jacob, throws his arms around Jacob and kisses Jacob. And Jacob and Esau, they weep together. 2 grown men who had once shared a womb, one womb, now weeping over each other, tears upon tears of reconciliation. And Esau then asks Jacob, why did you send all this livestock up ahead? And Jacob says, well, I sent them because I wanted to pacify you. I wanted to find favor in your eyes. And Esau says, no, I have already enough livestock. I have plenty, my brother. Keep whatever you have for yourself. But Jacob then says these words. He says, no, please, if I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For, I love this, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. And what ends up happening is Esau does take the gift. But here's the important part. It wasn't the gift that made Esau receive Jacob favorably. Esau received Jacob favorably because Jacob was his brother. It was nothing to do with what Jacob could do for him. It was everything to do with who Jacob was for him. And Esau's unconditional favor reminded Jacob in that moment of God, God's self. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God. And I think for us, it can remind us of God too. This story can remind us of God too, because Jesus spoke of God as a father who runs towards the prodigal son. Not because the son was a success, no, certainly not, but because that failure of a son was still a son, was still a beloved son, and nothing could change that. And so this is the gospel, this is the good news, that God loves you, the you that is underneath the mask. God loves you in your failure, God loves you in your vulnerability, God loves you in your brokenness, God loves you in your shame. If you're 3, God loves what is beneath the mask, whatever it is that you're trying to project, your accomplishments, your competencies, your successes. God loves what's underneath the mask. And as mentioned in the All Age Talk, our deceit, it just doesn't get us very far with God. And that is very, very liberating. Truth or truthfulness is a very important virtue for 3s. And Jesus can help us with this because Jesus is all about truth. In John's Gospel, for example, it's really interesting how Jesus is called truth. He's also said to be full of truth. And he also says the words, I tell you the truth, 28 times in that gospel. And if anyone can help you get back to your true identity and lose the mask, it's Jesus. If anyone can help you to believe that God loves you because you are his son or daughter, it's Jesus. If anyone can help you accept your failure, it's Jesus. If anyone can help you get back in touch with your feelings, it's Jesus. Jesus exhibits the best of all the numbers. He was like a healthy 3 in the way that he was inspirational, the way that he compelled people to join his movement. He was very competent as well. People were often amazed at his teaching. But hear this, Jesus also knew how to fail. He also knew how to feel. The cross and the resurrection were the ultimate human fail and victory of God, all wrapped up into one. And 3s will do so well to hear that invitation of Jesus to deny themselves, take up their cross and follow him, to learn to fail well. So, what can we take away? What intentional steps can a 3 take today to get healthier? One thing I'd suggest, invite a wise friend or a minister or spiritual director into your life if you haven't already done so. Because you need someone to walk with you and remind you of who you are. The person needs to be someone that you can be vulnerable with, someone who you can count on to love you even when you're a complete disaster, even when you're a complete mess, even when you're a complete failure. Because without a person like that, the risk is that you'll just keep on airbrushing those failures to look like wins. You'll keep on deceiving yourself and others. So invite a wise friend or minister or spiritual director, whatever. Secondly, learn to be, this is hard, but can you learn to be quiet? Learn to be alone and learn to be still. You don't have to learn them all at the same time, but stillness, solitude, and silence, they're like medicine for a 3. They're like medicine for a 3 because 3s place so much emphasis on activity and productivity. So silence, stillness, solitude, they're so important. And the Christian tradition is brimming with resources for this to help you with this. And it's likely that cultivating these things, silence, solitude, stillness, will help you to give more space to others in your life. Perhaps even to support others' leadership and to live a more balanced life. Another thing, challenge your view of success rather than uncritically adopting inherited views of success, which might have come from your parents or might have come from culture or your peers. Consider, how does Jesus see success? How did success feature in his life? Indeed, how did failure feature in Jesus' life? Challenge your view of success. And finally, if you're a 3, chances are you're a very competent person. You get the job done, full stop. You're probably competent even when you were 2 or 3, right? And that's good. We need competent people. Blimey, do we need competent people to help with things in church? But consider this. Consider working on your character twice as much as your competency. And no one will tell you to do this. Your boss won't tell you to do this. Your spouse won't tell you to do this. Many people won't tell you to do this. But because a lot of people are looking at competency is what a lot of books are written about, but consider spending twice as much effort on your character as on your competency. And by character, that doesn't mean how you appear to others, because that's the mask. By character, I mean the integration of your behaviour with your values and your values with how you see God and all of that, so it's working together as one authentic and integrated character. So, 3s, if there are any 3s. I realise that the path of transformation is not an easy one, especially because our culture values, rewards, reveres success so much. But remember that Esau didn't want Jacob's gifts. He wanted his brother, and that's how God sees us. He loves you for who you are, not for what you do. And what Jesus does is he invites us into a more liberating way of life. A liberating way of life where actually the truth does matter. And failure can be accepted. And the mask can finally be taken off. Amen.